Everyone, today I'm going to be doing a champion hero tier list for King Arthur's Knight's Tale. I've actually been meaning to sort of do this for a while, and I was sort of saying I was going to be holding off on some of these until the content patch, since we knew there was going to be some balance changes. I was pretty sure there weren't going to be any champion changes, and there weren't, so kind of waited all this time for no real reason, but getting to it now. To preface this, before I even go into tiering any of these heroes, / ranking them, there's only 7 of them, so they'll kind of be put in order that I think as well. Before I get to that, all champions are good. Literally any of these heroes you could pick to make your main champion through any difficulty level campaign, and they'll do fine. Some will do better than others, hence the tiering and the ranking, but even the weakest one will do you well. Champion is a very strong, very good, solid damage dealing class. They slot in very well as your primary damage dealer to be feeding your kills to in any of your team comps. You can't go wrong with them, so don't think that whoever I put at the bottom means they're like a shit hero. No, they're all good. Furthermore, I'm going to be tiering them without any gear. Generally, they all benefit from gear the same due to being the same class, but that's not entirely true. Some of them do have some different abilities from one another, which means certain gear choices can actually bump them a bit more than some of their peers. But due to the RNG nature of gear, I'm not going to consider that. This is just looking at their skill trees. Now, what do these tiers mean? I'm going to be ranking this for how they compare amongst each other within the class. If this was just to tier them like, how strong are they within the game compared to, classes in general, I mean, they'd probably all end up in like A tier or something like that, because, like I mentioned before, they're just a very good damage dealing class. So, amongst themselves, what is an S tier champion? S tier is basically what I think the best champion is in the game, or they just have this ability that just really heavily has them stand out amongst everyone else. A tier is basically a champion that I think is above average. They're very strong, may have some very powerful ability or mechanic to them that definitely sets them apart from the average or the standard. B tier is just your average or standard champion. There are heroes of each class, except for like one Arcanist, where there's just sort of a base template where there will be multiple heroes with identical skill trees that others are sort of deviations from. They're still good, they're still solid, they're just basic. And then finally, C tier is this champion is just sort of a downgrade, a step down, even if only a little bit from what is considered the standard, the average, the generic one. I didn't include a D tier because there just isn't enough of them to create large enough deviation amongst the class to warrant a D tier, because none of them are that bad either. I think that's everything, all of the details that I think I needed to establish before going into this, so let's start tiering them. First up is going to be Sir Balan. He's an example of a standard basic champion. He shares a skill tree with several others, and it's a very solid skill tree. They have access to defensive stance early on in Tier 1, which is a very good crutch ability for a lot of players, especially newer ones, to rely on and avoid damage with this character. And this isn't a bad thing. It's a powerful ability that's just useful if you don't have that much game knowledge yet. And due to him being a standard basic champion, that's exactly what the B tier is for. Very good, but, this is our template. Up next is the Black Knight, and if you've been watching my content, going back to even my very first video, you'll know where this guy's gonna go. Black Knight, I think, is an S tier champion. He, in my opinion, is the best champion in the game, even though his skill tree isn't super different. Really, it's just 2 abilities, and one of them you don't even use. He has Blood Hex in Tier 3, and I don't even use that whenever I run the Black Knight. Tier 1, he has Leap Attack, which is an enormous game changer for champions. One of the biggest weaknesses of the champion class is mobility and their AP economy. Due to wearing heavy armor, they have less AP within their basic pool than other classes. Heavy armor has a -2 or -1 penalty, and you can reduce this by 1 with a skill, but That still leaves them with a -1 if you're using the heaviest version of the heavy armor. And that's pretty much what I always use, and I think most people should use because the defensive stats are worth it, in my opinion. Having a smaller pool of AP while having no mobility moves makes it tough for your champions to get around the battlefield and kill who they need to kill and get their damage boost rolling with their rage ability. Leap attack, however, is a mobility move. It covers a larger distance and gets an attack in, and an AoE attack at that. For such a cheap cost of 5 AP, you save so much AP on this move, it's insane. And due to the attack also being an AoE, the ability to get multi-kills off of this mobility move and generate AP for himself off of rage and getting kills, which can then feed into getting free kills with Killing Spree off of any survivors around the impact point. The combo potential of this move is just insane. This one move, it's crazy how just one move makes such an enormous difference for the Black Knight as the champion class. Now, that's just my take on it. Other people may think that it's not as good, I may be overselling it, but just in my experience, over all the playthroughs I've done and the hundreds of hours that I've played in the game, I've managed to get some kills and some kinds of sweeps that just would not have been possible with any other champion. Next is Sir Brunor. He is another standard champion, just like Sir Balan, so he's going to go in B tier. There isn't a whole lot to say, it's just going to get repetitive. Even as a B tier champion, he's still very solid and really good to use. Up next is going to be Sir Kay. Sir Kay is the first champion you get in the game, and he is neutral. So that does mean if you want to get the loyalty bonuses, you're going to have to event farm with him. Unlike the previous three who have alignments, that being Tyrant, Rightful Old Faith, and Tyrant, so they can naturally just get a lot of loyalty bonuses due to matching alignments, Sir Kay is going to need to event farm or definitely going to need titles to get those bonuses, which is a bit of a downside to him. Generally, neutral is more of a hindrance than it is a bonus, even if it means they won't be losing loyalty. He has a lot of unique abilities, one in each tier. He has Death Strike in tier 1, he has Kick in tier 2, and he has Preparedness in tier 3. Now, I think Death Strike is a good ability, but it does replace Defensive Stance. Kick, I think, is just a added on ability, so this doesn't replace anything, as well as Preparedness in tier 3. He does have a good trait which lets him learn active skills for 1 skill point, which is very useful early in the game, because you can get a lot more skills put onto your hotbar, giving him a lot more sort of versatility in what he can do. It makes leveling up a little bit easier, but his negative trait is pretty annoying. Even if you're an experienced player, you can get like a paper cut on him sometimes, just because maybe you weren't paying super close attention. He loses 1 vitality, and then if you send him on a mission, when he's not at completely full health, you lose loyalty on him. Kick, I think, is a really good utility move. Preparedness, I think, is just garbage. So, it's kind of a tough call for me if I want to put him in C or like the bottom of B. I do think that he is the worst champion overall, just because the lack of defensive stance on him in particular can hurt, especially for the average player. Death Strike is good, but I don't think it really adds much to him. It is a good damage-dealing move if they have no armor. Later in the game, champions don't really need that big of a damage buff from Death Strike. And Preparedness is really bad. I mean, you don't have to take it, but I think I may put him in C tier. That's a tough call. Like I said, I could see him at the bottom of B. In general, again, you can make him work, but I do think he is just a little bit worse than your standard champions. I guess, to make it simplest for myself, I would definitely choose to take one of the standard champions over Sir Kay, and I think that's enough to kind of tell me that I think I should put Sir Kay in C tier. Next, we have Sir Lancelot, a very popular hero, a very cool one, definitely the most unique champion. He has a lot of abilities. His biggest downside is that he does not have Rage. He has Lone Wolf, which gives him various amounts of bonuses, including damage, AP, etc., if he is not adjacent to an ally. These bonuses are good, but they're not quite as good as Rage. So even though his damage dealing potential doesn't have as high a ceiling as his compatriots, he still does really good damage. He is still a champion. He has access to some standard champion moves like Cleave, and I'm pretty sure he also has Power Attack. He has Whirlwind, but he has a bunch of unique abilities. He has Radiance, which is a strong defensive to blind enemies, Ice Spikes, which is a good cone attack, and he has Inspire, which is huge, an amazing support ability. And on top of all that, he has Assault, which is a mobility move, and that's one of the biggest weaknesses for Champion. He just does so much, can provide so much support, so much utility, all kinds of debuffs as a champion. I think it more than makes up for his lower damage ceiling and the lack of rage. So honestly, I think he's an A-tier champion. He's really good. And he almost kind of feels like a Sage because of Inspire, but better, because the main reason you bring Sages is for the Inspire. So yeah, he's just really good. You really don't feel the lack of damage as like this huge downside, especially if you just bring a second champion or a Vanguard if you're running a Vanguard. He's just such a strong support. Next is Sir Lanval. He is another standard champion, so that puts him in B tier, but I'm going to put him at the bottom over these other two because his Restless trait. Now, I know some people don't mind Restless because if you just put him in the training ground, it doesn't count, and he won't lose a loyalty, and he gets extra XP from the training ground, so you can kind of perform some cheese where he can level up really fast in the training ground, and then make it much easier to use the Joust mechanic and auto-level up some heroes that are maybe on your main team. I would rather just have everyone in my round table be a character that I'm actually interested in using. I'm going to put him in B tier because the skill tree is the biggest contribution, but I'm putting him at the bottom of it because his Restless trait I just find annoying, and air quotes on this, cheese that he enables I think is just not actually that impactful. Our last one here is the White Knight. He is the Christian-based champion you get through the alignment, and he is also extremely powerful, primarily because of his Blessed Weapon passive, and that I think is going to put him in A tier. I know this may have some contention. Some people may like him more than the Black Knight because his Blessed Weapon ability has an upgrade that gives him an extra AP per kill, so he does have the highest AP generation out of all the champions, where if you give him the Essence, he can get 3, which means you're effectively only losing 1 AP per swing versus 2 on someone like the Black Knight. However, he does not have mobility, and I think the mobility and combo potential of Leap Attack is just more consistent and more impactful than the AP generation on Blessed Weapon. That being said, Blessed Weapon, still very strong. It's a damage boost, and it's an AP boost, so generally he will be outperforming the others in terms of damage and being able to get his ball rolling, because he will have extra damage on his initial swings before he starts getting the rage stacks. And the AP generation, while not quite as good as the mobility, does help extend his turn longer than the other people on this list. Now, if you were to get a teleport on kill item, which fixes the mobility problem, then yeah, he's probably going to jump up to S tier, and he's probably going to be the best one. Now, you don't get this in every run, so again, that's why I'm not including gear in this tiering, and even then, I still think Black Knight is fairly close behind, because Leap Attack has a huge AoE on it, and sometimes I use Leap Attack instead of going for the kill that will teleport me, so just saying. But just looking at the skill tree, it's primarily Blessed Weapon that's carrying him. That puts him into A tier. He does have another unique ability in tier 3 called Holy Armor, which just gives him an enormous amount of armor. This is fairly useful, but with abilities like the upgrade on damage focus, it feels a little unnecessary. And that's going to wrap it up for this tier list. I'm pretty confident in this ranking. This is also sort of in order how I would sort of rank them within each tier. I mean, these two are technically interchangeable. It's just depending on which alignment you go. Lanval is just definitely at the bottom. I guess Brunor does have a more useful trait because you can put him as Grandmaster of the Round Table to generate extra gold. That's a pretty minor thing, but I mean, it is something, I guess. But yeah, that's my tier list for the champions. This was pretty fun to do. I think this may not be a huge surprise for many people. I'm sure there may be a few smaller disagreements, but I honestly think this is pretty close to what most people may think or agree with. Anyways, if you do have disagreements, though, please let me know and why. I would definitely be interested to see your perspective and your take on why I maybe put someone too high or too low. And yeah, thanks for watching.